Okay, here it is. Also, feel free to join the study. It is the same one I sent you an invitation to. It's called Jovana's Classroom. If it's easier for you to follow that way, you can do that as well. The plan for today is to check this game. It is a game played between two grandmasters, and it is an excellent choice to check some very common strategic ideas. We'll start from this position. Uh, let's evaluate it and see what you guys think of it. How do I open the chat? Just a moment. Here it is. Okay, let's think about the position and you can tell me your opinion. Okay, so who is better here and why? Who is more comfortable? Black. Yes, Nathan, black is more comfortable. And why is that? Great. So, black does have a better development. You are right about that. White still needs to move this knight and develop the bishop. Black doesn't have the same problem. A black's knight is well developed on c6 and the bishop is ready to get out. White's problem was this pawn on c3. This pawn didn't allow the knight to get developed in the most natural way. All right, about the space. Black doesn't really have more space than white. Notice that black is occupying four ranks in total. One, two, three, four. White is occupying the same. So we cannot say that black has more space, but black definitely has a better development. All right. White's last move was queen c2, developing the queen. Let's find the best continuation for black. What do you suggest?
Could we try b5? Pushed upon. Because that traps the
Okay,
knight, and also we could threaten to trap the bishop.
let's talk about b5. After this move, it is quite logical for white to continue with a4. What would you play next?
I'm listening.
I wasn't able to hear that. Bishop, I see a message. Bishop A6. Bishop A6 is not the best move. Notice that when Black started with B5, he weakened this diagonal. Now, White has a very strong move, Bishop D5. The knight on C6 is a bit shaky, and if Black takes, now we don't have a good square for this knight. We'll have to go back somewhere. Take a look at this position and Black's pawn structure on the queen side. Black has two isolated pawns. This is not an improvement for him. If we go back, White doesn't even have to play bishop d5 first. He can simply take, and again, Black will have weaknesses in his pawn structure. White didn't weaken his own. He got a half-open file for the rook. So bishop a6 allows White to damage Black's pawn structure. b4 is another suggestion. This move is better than bishop a6, but it also allows White certain things. What does White get after b4? Which pawn is weakened? b4. Okay, you see a bunch of arrows. Yes, the pawn on c7 has been weakened, that's true. Also, after b4, Black gives up this c4 square, which becomes excellent for White's pieces, the knight and the bishop. b5 is not the best idea. We need to be very careful when pushing our pawns forward. In some cases, we'll be getting more space, which is a good thing. We will restrict our opponent's pieces, but also it is possible to overexpand, which makes our pawns weak if they are not supported by our pieces. In this case, Black's pawns will be rather weak on the queen side. Let's find something else instead of b5. a4. Let's take a look at this move. After a4, what will white respond, Nicholas? What do you think? He will just take. Yes, bishop c4 is possible, but it's much better to simply take a pawn. That pawn is not protected. So a4 is not the move. We need to find another plan. Any ideas?
Could we maybe play h6 to prevent knight to g5 and then knight to f7 or bishop to f7?
Okay. Is it dangerous for black when white captures on f7? Black will get two pieces for a rook and a pawn. Who is that good for? Is it better to have two pieces or a rook and a pawn? Yes, two pieces. Two pieces are stronger than a rook and a pawn. So we shouldn't prevent this move. Knight g5. This move doesn't threaten anything. It's not good for white to take on f7. h6 is not necessary. It doesn't make black's position worse, but it doesn't improve it either. Quite a logical move here is to develop the bishop, of course. If white takes, black takes. But instead of that, black chose something else. He noticed that he has a very good outpost for his knight. Let's find it. Which square is an excellent outpost for the knight? F4, excellent. Black chose knight h5. We know that the knight is not well placed on the edge of the board, but in this case that's only temporary. The knight will move to f4. White now continued with knight c4, opening up the bishop and controlling f4. With knight c4, he also allows that bishop to get developed. Should we go knight f4 here?
No.
No, this is not good for black because he'll get these doubled pawns on the f file. What instead? Bishop e6 is good, but that doesn't solve the problem with the knight. We need to find something to do with this knight. We cannot just leave it on the edge of the board. Bishop e6 is fine, but let's see what we can do with the knight.
Knight,
Okay. Yes.
knight g3.
Okay, knight g3. The rook will move. What is the knight doing on g3? Do we have a purpose for that knight there? If white manages to attack black's bishop on c5 and that bishop is forced to move, the knight will be hanging. So the knight is not well placed on g3. After the rook moves, the knight is not doing anything. I see another suggestion, b5. This move is fine, but there is something better. After knight e3, we are able to go to f4. That diagonal is covered now. The bishop cannot take. But going to f4 is not good here. The same reason that we talked about before. After a4, we cannot take or protect our b5 pawn because we'll get two isolated pawns. Same happens if we protect, so we'll have to push, which weakens our position a bit. Also, this diagonal is quite weak. Let's find something else. Knight f6, going back with the knight. In that case, we don't achieve much. We went knight h5 and then we retreated the knight. Our position hasn't changed at all. And white did improve his position when he played knight f4. The best move here for black is to play queen f6. After this move, he will be able to play knight f4. Here, white chose king h2. What do you think about this move? Is this good for white? No, king h2 doesn't improve white's position at all. If we go back, what is better for white instead of king h2?
Bishop g5.
bishop g5. Yes, this move does make more sense than king h2. The queen will have to move, and we have a very decent position for both black and white. Also quite logical is this move, simply developing the rook. White chose king h2, and now we can continue with our plan, knight f4. White chose bishop e3 here. If instead white takes and we take back, the king will have to retreat. Let's find the best continuation now for black.
Queen g3.
Queen g3, is that the move? After this, let's say white moves the king away. How would you continue? Is it good to take that pawn? You lose the bishop. Since the pawn on f2 is no longer pinned, you'll probably have to move the queen. You haven't achieved that much with queen g3. In the end, you had to retreat your queen. Black has a very interesting tactical idea here. Excellent. Bishop h3. The idea is if white takes, we can take on f3. Also possible is to first give a check and then take on f3. That might be more accurate. And of course, if white doesn't take, black is a pawn ahead. So taking the knight is not good for white now. He will lose the h3 pawn, as we have seen. So white decided to play bishop e3. This move is a mistake for white. Let's find the reason why. How can black continue? Black has a very strong tactical continuation. Do you have any ideas? Knight g2 is the move. Let's see why. white has to take. What is your idea? Excellent. So black sacrificed both of his pieces now. Great. Now, if we take a look at the material on the board, black sacrificed one of his pieces for 2 pawns. Let's go back to check this sacrifice one more time. The idea is to capture this knight on f3. So first, we remove the pawn that's protecting this knight. After that, we remove the king. And queen takes f3. So white at the moment has a piece and black has 2 pawns. It's not that big of a difference in material, and we can notice that black has plenty of compensation for that because white's king is now exposed. What do you suggest next? Quite logical, trying to open up the position more and include the f-rook into the attack as well. But this move doesn't work for tactical reasons. Can you find the best continuation for white? Excellent. Knight e5, we have a discovered check, and also the queen is under attack. Let's find something else.
Could we go bishop e7, and then h4 maybe?
Okay, let's take a look.
Or no,
Bishop
never mind,
e.
that wouldn't work. Because pawn's protecting that square, so it doesn't really do anything.
When you go
It's
to
like,
h4,
yeah. When you
there
go to
is no
h4,
threat.
yeah.
This bishop is not helping black that much. White can continue with something like rook g1, for example. And if bishop h4, let's say rook g2 with the idea to double the rooks even. Black doesn't have a threat. Let's go back. Let's think of something else. Black's idea, of course, should be to attack white's king. That's the whole point of sacrificing material, to open up the king and attacking. But let's find the best way to do it. We need to include more pieces into the attack. We cannot cause any serious problems to white if we only have our queen there. The best we can do with only the queen is go for a perpetual check. Which piece can we include into the attack? Bishop? How can we include the bishop? What is your idea, Nicholas? The bishop can go to h4. We have already discussed that. The problem is that after bishop h4, black doesn't have any threats. Here, black has something better. Black can use the rook lift and play rook a6. The idea is to transfer the rook to h6. We had this suggestion as well, including the rook like this, but it doesn't work because knight e5. In this position, we can include the a rook into the attack. Now, the best continuation for white is to play queen d1. Trading queens is of course good for white because without the queens on the board, black will not be able to attack white's king. What now for black? Great, taking the pawn on e4. At the moment, material is even on the board. White has a piece and black has 3 pawns for it. Now, white. Okay, let's talk about bishop takes. This move doesn't work for white. Let's see why. How can black win the game? Knight d4, excellent. The idea is to include the rook and give a checkmate. What do you suggest here for white? How can white defend? Black has two very strong ideas. We mentioned rook h6. Also possible is including the knight into the attack. Any suggestions for white?
Knight d2.
Knight d2 attacking the queen. Now we have a checkmate in 3 moves. Let's find it.
Rook h6 check.
Excellent. Rook h6. There are two ways to give a checkmate actually. Now white can cover, but in the end when the king moves, we have a checkmate. Or if the king goes to g3, we have a checkmate. Another possibility is to play this move first. It also gives a checkmate in 3 moves. White can cover, but he loses the game after this. Okay, so if we go back, if bishop takes c5, it's very hard for white to defend after this move. There are so many different checkmating threats, and white cannot defend against all of them. Probably the best is to just sacrifice the knight and cover the rook like this. But of course that's losing for white. In the game, white didn't take the bishop for that reason. Instead, he chose rook g1. Let's find a continuation for black. Okay, if black takes the bishop, white takes back. What is your idea? Rook g4. And black's attack seems quite strong, but can black actually convert it into a win? Any ideas how Black can continue his attack? There isn't anything here for Black. If we go back, taking the bishop would allow the knight to join the defense. That's not the best move. It will allow white also to play rook g4 and push black's queen back. The best move is actually to give a check. The king needs to move. Let's find the best continuation here. Any suggestions? We need more pieces to attack the king. How can we include more? Knight d4. Excellent, Nicholas. After this move, black is ready to include the rook into the attack. What we need to calculate is what happens if white takes. What is your suggestion after this move? Rook g6, quite logical. The king will move. What next? Black here doesn't have a good continuation. Trading rooks doesn't help Black. He just loses his main attacking piece. Taking on d4 doesn't help him either because White will trade the rook and then move the bishop. Even take here. If we take a look at this position, White is doing just fine. Black cannot cause him any problems around the king. So if we go back, instead of rook g6, it's necessary to start with this move. Where will White's bishop go? At first sight, it seems that we have these two squares available. But if the bishop retreats, Black has a clear winning position. How should Black continue to win the game? Any ideas for the best move for Black? Now that the bishop is no longer on e3, Black also has the open e-file, and he can come there with a rook. For example, rook e8 at some point to attack White's king. So the best move is rook g6. Now, if the king tries to escape, we can continue attacking the king. Now there is a checkmate in two moves. Let's find it.
D3.
Excellent. D3. And when the king goes back, we take the rook. All right, so if we go back to this move, taking the pawn, we saw what happens if the bishop moves. The e-file becomes open and we can use that. If the king moves, we have d3. Now our queen is protecting d3. That's another thing. All right, White cannot protect his bishop. Moving it backward doesn't work for him. and leaving the bishop here would lose too much material for white. White tried this move, bishop g5, sacrificing this bishop. Now the queen is under attack, so black simply moved the queen. What is the material situation on the board now after white sacrificed the bishop? Who is better here materially and for how much?
Black is down a knight for 4 pawns.
Excellent. So black has 4 pawns for the knight. Now white tried bishop c2. What is the best continuation for black here?
D2. I mean D3.
If d3, if white takes, we have a checkmate in one move. This move wins the game for black. White will probably have to play something like this, after which black wins a piece. In the game, black played this move instead. Rook g2, and now rook f6. The idea of rook f6 is to push d3 and attack f2. White tried to prevent this with queen d3. Let's find the best continuation for black. The rook will go back to g1. What was your idea? Black can still retreat the queen and have a winning position. But there is something better here for black, something more active. Black can play a rook f3, attacking the queen. Now in the game, white sacrificed the queen and lost another piece. After this, he resigned the game. Black has more pawns and a clear winning position. So if we go back, instead of sacrificing the queen, if white tries something like this, retreating the queen, it doesn't work because of d3. Bishop takes and rook f2. For that reason, white decided to sacrifice a piece. And in the end, white resigned the game. If we go to the beginning of this game, or the position that we started with, if you take a look at this center, do you know how this center is called? What type of center is this? All right, so this is called a fixed center. When we have pawns that are blocked in the center, but we still have a possibility to maneuver with our pieces around these pawns, then we have a fixed center. In most cases, you will see two pawns like this blocked, and you can use the squares around them for your pieces. It's very important to differentiate between a fixed center and a closed center. When we have a closed center, then we cannot maneuver around our pawns. We normally have pawn chains that are blocked. For example, in the King's Indian defense, we have a closed center. In fixed center, we can maneuver around the pawns. When the center is closed, we don't have any open diagonals, open files that we can use. That is the difference. And one of the most common plans when we have the fixed center is to maneuver with our pieces and use the squares that are strong for us. For black, we have these two squares that the pawn is controlling. We cannot use d4, but we can use f4. White has these two strong squares. So white's plan can be to occupy one of them and use them as outposts for the pieces. It is quite common when we have a fixed center to use these strong squares. That's why black chose this plan. Okay, do you have any questions about a fixed center or this game? Any comments? All right, then this will be all for today, and I'll see you guys next week. We'll talk about a different game. I'll stop sharing now. Have a good week, and I'll see you next Tuesday.